Well, thank you. I call the member for LaTrobe.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I second the motion put forward by the member for Macmillan. I congratulate him for listening so carefully to his local community and working so hard. This is obviously a very big issue in the electorate of Macmillan. The issue of genetic modification, otherwise known as GM of food, is a sensitive one also in my electorate of LaTrobe. As my electorate is the neighbour to Macmillan, you could imagine this. I've been contacted by many constituents angered by the lack of public debate on GM crops, and I therefore support the member for Macmillan's call for the government to conduct an independent, broad-range scientific investigation into the genetic modification of food and biotechnology to assess not only the health of the crops and the food, but also the potential for contamination, the commercial implications for Australian primary industries, and the benefits and risks associated with genetically modified organisms. Until Australian consumers can be confident of the safety of GM foods, they should not be produced or sold in Australia. We need an urgent review. In my electorate of LaTrobe, we have the Shire of Yarra Ranges, a local council encompassing part of LaTrobe, which has been instrumental in raising public awareness of the potential dangers of GM food. LaTrobe is home to several diverse agricultural industries, from orchards and vineyards in the south to livestock raising in the west. Contamination from GM crops would be disastrous for these industries. The decision of the Victorian Government to lift the memorandum on the cultivation of genetically modified crops threatens Australia's prime industries, particularly organic agriculture. Farmers groups such as the Berwick Farmers Market, and I congratulate them for putting on a fantastic market, held in my electorate of Latrobe on the fourth Saturday of every month, celebrate organic and farm-fresh produce. GM contamination of their crops would spell the end of this organic food market. Contamination can occur in many ways. Wind could carry GM organisms from a GM farmer's crop to a non-GM farmer's crop, or organic produce could come into contact with materials that have previously come into contact with the GM produce, such as machinery or grain storage facilities. Once the supply chain has been breached, farmers cannot market their food as organic again. Even more alarming is that such breaches can have legal consequences for farmers as well. As most genetically modified crops are patented, farmers of non-GM crops can potentially be sued for patent infringements and theft of intellectual property if they are found to be cultivating crops with GM organisms belonging to another farmer, even if the cultivation was unintentional. This actually happened to Canadian farmer Percy Smizer, who was successfully sued by biotechnology firm Monsanto for patent breaches of GM canola. Even with a 10-kilometre buffer zone surrounding GM farms, the seeds can be carried tens of kilometres by wind. There is no fail-safe way to protect GM-free crops against contamination. Supporters of genetic modified argue that GM food can eradicate world hunger by drought-proofing crops and making them disease-resistant, which would increase yield. While there is certainly evidence to suggest that GM has benefits for all crop fields, it cannot be ignored that almost one-third of GM maize grown in the United States is used for ethanol production. The maize needed to produce the only 95 litres of ethanol would feed one person for a year. When considered in context, it is suggested that the impetus of cultivation of GM crops is not eradication of world hunger. Despite indications that GM crops could prove more profitable than non-GM crops, fears about potential health risks posed by GM foods means there is a high demand for non-GM products throughout Europe and Asia. Tasmanian canola farmers recently secured a lucrative contract with Japan with GM-free canola, proving that farmers can choose to remain GM-free without compromising the profitability of their yield. While there are many arguments supporting the cultivation of genetic modified crops, there is a simple fact that there is a long-term study needed to be done in Australia to ensure it is safe. Finally, I am not opposed to GM crops, but what I want to do is make sure everything is done to ensure a correct and proper review that these products are actually safe to be used in Australia and actually help Australians and not actually endanger our agricultural industry. Thank you.